Welcome to The Dogs Were Good Again. In this episode, I'm going to tell you all about the history of the WeRateDogs rating system, as well as discuss some of our highest rated dogs ever. You might notice that this is a bit of a non-traditional episode. That is because I'm currently in Scotland and this is pre-recorded, but that does not mean that we don't have another adoptable special guest.
Oh, that looks like a good dog. That's a good dog. Yeah, that looks like a good dog. A very good dog. Hey, that looks like a very good dog.
Episode 8's special guest is Ohtani. Please welcome Ohtani. Hi, bud. Oh, you're going right for the treats. He's sniffing him, but Hey, bud. How's it going? And that's what all he came out for. Just some water. Hey, and now I did hide some treats, and he's gonna find them. And oh, he passed them up. Ohtani, come here, bud. Come here. Hey, bud. Hi. Hello. You're huge. Oh my goodness. Hi, Ohtani. Ohtani is 4 years old. Wow. He is a Great Dane Doberman mix. I believe that. He weighs 85 pounds. No way. I think he's triple digits, but officially he's 85 pounds. He's adoptable from Wags and Walks here in LA. His adoption fee is covered. Some notes about Ohtani. This is straight from Wags and Walks. Ohtani is a sweet and affectionate pup with a playful personality. He is currently licking his Wags and Walks rep like crazy just off camera. He's kid-friendly and absolutely loves spending time with his people. This might be the first time we have to refill the water bowl. So from Wags and Walks, he's kid-friendly and absolutely loves spending time with his people, soaking up all the love and affection he can get. Ohtani does well with other large pups. He enjoys romping around with them. I'm obsessed with you. Hi. Thank you so much. You can see he's got one very fancy eye. You can see the future with that one. Yeah, is it called heterochromia? Heterochromia. Wags and Walks also discovered that he knows some commands in Spanish. I don't know Spanish, so I'm the one. I'm the one that can't communicate with him. He's very treat motivated. He walks well on a leash with a confident handler, is fully potty trained, and settles well in his crate. We think Ohtani will do best in a forever home with no small dogs or cats. If you're looking for a big, lovable pup to welcome into your family, consider Ohtani. Adoption fee again covered. So yeah, we hope he hangs out with us. We'll see. Competes with Turnpike for our biggest episode 2's special guest, for our biggest adoptable special guest. But yeah, he's quite a gentle giant. Very, very sweet. Very, very sweet. This is 8 episodes in a row that our special guest's adoption fee has been covered. So shout out to you all. Shout out to this community. That is delightful. No pup dates on our previous dogs for this episode. We're hoping for a marathon of pup dates when I return for episode 10, I believe. Episode 10, expect a wide range of pup dates on all our previous adoptable guests. Okay, so a brief history on the ratings of WeRateDogs. So I started the account in November of 2015, and it was originally just on Twitter. We quickly moved to all the other platforms, but started on Twitter first. And I imagined that I would need to see a dog like out in the wild, and I would take a photo of that dog, and that's how I would then caption and rate that dog. But after our very first post, we were inundated with everyone DMing us photos of their own dog, asking if we could rate them. So, and that was immediately way better. There was a sense of community. It was brilliant. But I also thought that these would be legitimate dog ratings. They weren't. I'm very ashamed to admit that they weren't always above a 10 out of 10. I thought that they would be more legitimate if they weren't all above 10 out of 10. So on the screen, you'll see our very first dog rate of all time. This is my friend Morgan's dog at the time. We Rate Dogs was made in an Applebee's, by the way, and this gentleman was sitting across from me at that booth, and this was his dog. So that's how the account started. And again, his dog here got an 8 out of 10. Again, this is a shameful hit past of We Rate Dogs. And then the first time I ever went 10 out of 10 was for a little fluff ball named Pipsy. Okay, I said he enjoys traveling the sea and getting tangled in his leash, and that I would kill for him. And then 12 out of 10. That was the first time we went 10 out of 10 plus, and it broke the internet seemingly. And everyone was like, well, this is how the ratings have to be from now on. I was worried about inflation, but the passion for Pipsy and the rating over 10. Every dog after Pipsy was over 10 out of 10, and over time our rating system kind of settled between 12 out of 10 and 15 out of 10. So then we got a dog story that simply broke our scale that at the time went from really 10 out of 10 to 13 out of 10. This was our very first 14 out of 10, and it went to a dog named Jack. This is a story direct from a community member. This is Amy. She's telling us about her dogs. Today I was walking my 2 dogs, Frodo, who's blind, so I assume the one in the back here, and Jack. So Jack is the dog who received our very first 13 out of 10. And I was down on the slipway at the beach. Frodo managed to get out of his collar and fell 8 feet into the ocean. He started swimming out to sea like some Nemo shit. So I started freaking out, taking off my coat, thinking I'm going to have to jump in and swim after this blind imbecile. Her words, not mine. Anyway, Jack jumps off the friggin', 2 G's, pier and swims out to blind Nemo and turns him around and guides him back to shore, okay? That's the photo. This is what's happening in that photo. That's how Jack got our very first 14 out of 10 and completely shattered our existing scale. Then we got our first 15 out of 10. In October of 2017, we posted our very first 15 out of 10 dog. This dog broke our previous scale and would set the tone for the highest rating we've ever given and really ever will at this point. This is Smiley, the blind therapy dog. He passed in October of 2017, and our post acknowledging his passing was again the first time we ever awarded a dog a 15 out of 10. I am joined today by his human, Joanne George, and she asked fans of Smiley to honor his life through kindness and to give back and always see with your heart. Joanne, how are you?
Very good. Bringing back a lot of emotions,
Yeah.
hearing those special things about a very special dog. So forgive me if I...
You're fine. This community and this audience is very used to an emotional roller coaster, so they are as prepared as you could be, I'd imagine. So first, tell us how Smiley originally came into your life.
I was a veterinary technician working at a vet hospital, and and his story also, shows that pets are not property, or they shouldn't be, but they are. And we had a woman that was asking to have about 20 golden retrievers put to sleep at her puppy mill. And dogs that had been previously used for breeding, some that had defects and injuries, and Smiley was one of them. And I remember saying to the vet, I said, I'm not going to this place to hold down 20 golden retrievers and put them down. I won't go. And so we came up with a plan, and we said, if we went and we put smiles on our faces and tried to hold back our, anger, would she let us take these dogs home instead of euthanizing them? So that's what we did. I borrowed vehicles and trucks from people and crates, hoping that when we went, that she would give us these dogs instead of under the orders to put them to sleep. And Smiley was one of them. And actually, I will say that the SPCA had been in there and checked out the place, and they gave her 2 weeks to have this list of dogs checked out by a vet. And because they're property, she was allowed to euthanize them instead of having them checked, but and fixed or whatever. So anyway, her solution was to just euthanize them, and that was okay with the SPCA. So anyway, she agreed, and she let us take these 20 golden retrievers. So we split them up between a couple of the girls that had gone. I think I came home with 7, and Smiley was one of them. And we had no problem adopting out all the dogs once we had them all fixed and such, but nobody would take Smiley. I had no intention of keeping him. I just thought we would find him a home, but he was this first dog, and this was before the internet. There was no Facebook. There was really, I didn't have the internet. You know what I mean? We couldn't just Google something and go, blind dog. Now we know that they're everywhere. You know what I mean? And we have resources to look up and how to, look after them. But anyway, everybody kept coming up with excuses. They said, oh, we can't adopt him. I think we're going to have kids. I couldn't have a blind dog. And I'm like, oh, yeah, you're right. Mm-hmm. And oh, we have a cottage. We couldn't take a blind dog. And anyway, he ended up staying with me just by default. And, and the rest is just, I remember thinking I'm going to prove to these people that all these things that they came up with are wrong, misconceptions, that just because a dog can't see doesn't mean that he can't, live a life like a normal dog. So
and he was anything but normal. When did you first realize that Smiley could be a therapy dog, not just function as a normal dog, but go well beyond that?
It was meeting people out walking. That's really what it was. And people would stop us on the street and they'd be like, they'd look at him and they'd be like, what's wrong with his eyes? I'd say, well, he doesn't have any eyes. And, the funniest comment that we would always get was, well, how does he see? I'm like, he doesn't? I would always joke that no children ever, school-age children ever asked me that. They were always adults. They would say, that was always the common thing. What's wrong with his eyes? Well, he was born without them. Well, how does he see? Because he must see something.
That's so funny.
Does he see shadows? Does he see light? I'm like, he has no eyeballs. Mm-hmm. There's nothing. And so people would meet him on the street, ask a few questions. And he was 2 when I got him from this puppy mill. And so he'd been 2 years in this place. And there was over 100 adult golden retrievers and at least 50 puppies. He had scars on his face where the other dogs would probably bite at his face when he would move towards food, and he had splits in his ear. And so 2 years in this puppy mill. But so I would, give them the little story there on the sidewalk, and you could see it was just but this golden retriever was just like, that's where he got his name, Smiley. And, we find out that he has this eye condition goes hand in hand with dwarfism. So, and anybody who met him, they'd be like, I thought he looked so much bigger in pictures and videos.
He does.
They didn't realize, he was very small. Even when we got him, he was a bit underweight, but he was he was under 40 pounds.
Wow.
So if you can just sort of picture that, I think he was 37 pounds. Very short, very short limbs. But his head was a regular sized golden retriever. And then it almost seemed like oversized teeth. So, when he's panting and then his eyes are squinted shut, it was just it was all teeth and his eyes squinted. So, they just always looked like they were closed. And I used to have people say that too. They're like, oh, look, he's squinting. The sun is in his eyes, or is he sleeping?
Yeah. Has he tried opening his eyes?
So, it's just the, so then people would hear this story and then just be like, wow, all this, but look how happy he is. And, that's all I would ever hear is, wow, but look how happy he is. And I would see some people that would be brought to tears, and I remember thinking when they meet a blind person on the road, walking somewhere, do they start crying?
Are they emotional? Yeah.
It's just kind of an odd thing. But then the real one was, so this woman came out and she heard the whole story, and then we, passed on, we went. 2 weeks later, I was walking probably down in the same area in our neighborhood, and I see this woman just running, towards us. And I was thinking, okay, and she comes over and she just like fell to her knees and buried her head in his face. And she said she was a police officer and she has been on leave for PTSD. There's, some event. I don't know what it was. And she said that she had just made like she just felt different about life after meeting Smiley and hearing his story and seeing how he, overcame everything. And, and is just still so happy. And she just said she just made major breakthroughs and she has just felt better. And she's telling me all this and she's just buried in his face, and she was crying. Now I was crying and and that's, it was her that I just thought he needs to be shared, he needs to be shared with the world. And I didn't know how I was going to do it because, like I said, there was no internet, there was no Facebook. But I had heard of a therapy dog program. Like I just heard about it, and different shows and the news maybe or something. And I thought, I'm going to do this. And I was already visiting my grandmother, with him, just because he was, she loved dogs. I would go to her nursing home and with him and, on my way to her, I'd have to stop and see everybody else along the way. And I just thought, wow, this, he was just so gentle and sweet. And especially because he didn't have eyes, he didn't like move towards people, in even his happy way. He just sort of stayed, and just allowed people to enjoy him. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So he really had that great demeanor. And so I started looking for this therapy dog, group and community. And we went through the testing and they had never had, a dog like Smiley going through it. And I remember the examiner, should have brought Kleenex out. She ended up in tears during the testing once it was all complete because he just did so well. Like he was just, wow. He was just so amazing, and I will say, it took a while, to get him to that point. I will say he wasn't just like that when I got him. He had issues, he wasn't house trained. He was a chewer. He chewed everything. He ate a couch right down to the boards, and I didn't even realize he was doing it, but he would always hide in corners and behind things. And he would get in behind the couch and I didn't realize, but all behind the couch, he had already started and I didn't notice it until it came around the front. And, and because he was a chewer, I started taking him everywhere. I was like, he cannot stay in the house. He couldn't go in a crate. He would just, defecate all over himself and he'd make a bigger mess. So he just started coming everywhere with me. And that's all he needed. It was the socialization and, getting him out there in the world because he had just been inside a big barn, for 2 years of his life. And so our first, actually, was that our first? I can't remember if that was our first placement for the therapy dogs, but it was at a place where they wanted a therapy dog, but they had never been able to. No therapy dog had been able to do it because it was a home for adults with severe mental and physical disabilities. And so severe that physically, even a therapy dog couldn't get used to it. It was, just so different. And that's the thing, because he couldn't see, he didn't see those differences. And I just was just this is incredible. And again, if you didn't have a blind dog in your family, or if you didn't have a neighbor with a blind dog, you didn't know anything about them. Do you know what I mean? Like I said, we couldn't, there was no Instagram for this. Yeah. So it was just really so incredible, how it just worked because just think, what I mean? These people that, might have been even startling to children and startling to the sight of a dog. You know what I mean? Some dogs are startled by a cowboy hat. You know what I mean? But these people had physical disabilities and their language was very different and their movements were very, if they even had any movements, it was very extreme. And Smiley just
Did his thing.
never, yeah, you know what I mean? Like I said, and that's where we really realized we're like, and that he saw with his heart, and he didn't judge by what, just like what we're always trying to teach everybody, you know what I mean? It's not about what's on the outside, it's what's on the inside. And he just had this great lesson for everybody, that we were realizing. And that's what people would, when I started realizing that, when people would say, well, how does he see? I'd say he sees with his heart. And, a great thing that, and I'd never had any experience with any kind of dogs with disabilities. But I'd be walking him, and it seemed, obviously golden retrievers are very popular, but I'd swear, I'd be like, he gets so excited when a golden retriever would be walking towards him. I kept thinking, going, okay, I know this sounds crazy, but I was like, it's like he knows the golden retriever, because as soon as he'd see a golden retriever, he would be like so excited. And
that's me too, Joanne. I do the same thing.
Yeah, exactly. Right. I was just like, okay, what is happening here? Like, and then if it was another dog coming towards him, like a different breed, he wasn't excited. So I was just like, what's happening? And then I realized about the energy, let's just say a golden retriever gives off, and the sound a golden retriever, and I would be like, I'd mimic it to people. I'd be like, that is an energy.
Yeah.
Where, a different breed, let's just say a German Shepherd, out on the road, comes in very quietly and still and looking, and he would sense that and then be like, and, he really taught me a lot about how dogs learn. And it was all about energy. Like he knew, what was going on. If I was nervous, he was nervous. And so it really also taught me to be, in check with my emotions, especially with him. I had to be his calm, I had to be calm for him. I had to be confident for him. And, but yeah, when we started at this, place, the home for people with disabilities, I also saw, and you know what I'm talking about, like when a dog gives you a kiss, when a dog licks your hand, when a dog, comes up to your face, like it's love, right? Like, and these people have gone, that are in this home, they lived with their parents. And then when their parents, passed on or weren't able to care for them anymore, they would go into these homes. So they had only felt the love of their mom and their dad, you know what I mean? And family. But when Smiley licked their hand or came up and gave just the gentle lick on their face, I saw their face flush up like a little kid in love. Do you know what I mean? They felt a different kind of love like that from mom. You know what I mean? And I just thought they would blush. You know what I mean? And I just thought he's giving them like a real true love feeling, like a kiss, like, and I saw it time and time again. And it was just the most beautiful thing, He really made a difference. I saw, and he gave them something that they'd never felt before. And, like I said, they hadn't been able to have a therapy dog in there. And
yeah,
that's
so wonderful. And you mentioned that like this you got him and before the internet and before you could share him with the world. And then, here's Ohtani. I'll talk over here. But then you were able to start this incredible online community that had this message of seeing with your heart, and people really rallied around this dog. Tell us about those early moments where you realized that, oh wow, like the entire internet loves this dog as well.
It was very strange, as I never forget. So then we got Facebook. I got Facebook, and that was a big thing. And I was many years late into the Facebook thing. And then I remember having a few friends, and it was all, people from back in high school. And, and I remember somebody saying to me, you should get a Facebook page for Smiley. And I just remember going, let me just put this out here. I will never be that person that will have a Facebook page for my dog, because that was even just started. I was like, never, ever. Like, I was like, forget that. I am not doing that. which is just so funny now. Right?
Yeah.
The whole world revolves around this. Anyway, then we I entered like a contest. It was a photographer, and it was a rescue story, and she was promoting rescues and rescue stories, and she was local in our or she's a couple hours away anyway. So I sort of told Smiley's story.
She had no idea. She had no idea what she was about to hear.
Yeah, exactly. So, she loved the story. And so he, won this contest to get a photo shoot. And, this is like, again, no iPhones. I had no iPhone. I didn't even have a camera, and if I took a picture, it was with a disposable, you know what I mean? And we just never took pictures. So we went and got these, outdoor, we went to a place, and and same thing, like she was in tears, and she just, and still probably by this time, I'd had him like, we had been doing a lot of things, he was in the newspaper a lot, what I mean? Just as the therapy dog, and, things like that. I would go to the ladies' church, like the groups, would ask us to come, and, things like that. It was just all very local. So anyway, she took these beautiful shots, and I think she posted them, I think it was on her website, or I don't even know how those pictures got out to like truly like the world. I don't know where she had them posted, but it was all because of those photos. They got seen somewhere, and it just like all of a sudden within days, it was just everywhere, and like I said, like you look back to those years, now we have all these wonderful, dogs with disability pages to teach us and how that they still can live, great lives. Because I also had a lot of, not haters, but I met, I had to put him in a kennel once, you know what I mean? And instead of even having somebody look after him, I thought, I'm going to put him in this boarding kennel. And with another dog that he lived with, I said, please keep them together so they know. I even was just like, it was just for 2 days. It's not the most pleasant thing, but at least I knew he'd be safe.
Yeah.
And when I came to pick him up, he started saying, he goes, you know what? It's a real shame. It's a real shame. And I was thinking his next thing was that, that he was born that way.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh. He said it was a shame that he was not put down as a puppy because this dog has no quality of life. I was just like, give me his stuff.
Yeah.
We have to leave, but we had a lot of people, really saying the reason he was deemed by the SPCA to never have any quality of life.
Yeah.
It was, so he was like the first dog. I really believe there was nothing else out there,
Yeah,
actively
showing off that ability to have a quality of life with those differences.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Like, look what he can do. And, and that's what it was. Like, first of all, just the giving back, being able to give back and, teach, great lessons. But also, he could be off leash. You know what I mean? I was taking him to the forest trails, and he was learning to stay on the path, and he was using his, feet to feel the sand path versus the, this. And he was swimming. He was going out in the boat with us, because this was our life. And he was just with us, So, so then once the pictures got out, we started getting calls from a couple of different, actually Rachel Ray wanted us on their show, but they couldn't figure out a way to, get us to New York because they said he wouldn't be able to go on a plane, and they wanted him to go underneath. And I'm like, yeah, that's not.
Yeah, that'd be tough.
And then we ended up, Meredith Vieira show, also in New York, got us on a flight, and we came. Actually, they sent a team out to us first and did a little story of the therapy work he did. And I think by this time we were also visiting schools by this time, because we really realized, how much Smiley, could affect kids, and kids could relate to him about being. Every kid at one point goes, I'm different.
Yeah, they have a perceived have a perceived difference in themselves,
Yeah, whether it's curly hair, straight hair, or different height, and so they realize that we're all different, and we all learn differently. That was a big one, kids that, some kids are really great in math. Other kids have to really work hard, and maybe they need some extra help, and it takes them longer but with that extra help and a little extra time, they still are able to get there, just like Smiley. And that's what I would say when we got there. We would get to the class. I'd say, wow, that was a big flight of stairs that Smiley had to do. And it really took him a while. You know, he just had to go really slowly and he was a little scared. But here he is, you know what I mean? He did it. And, you know, that's, you know, just like I said, a lot of ways that kids can relate. And, you know, not judging and, you know, picking I'd ask the kids, do you choose your friends by how tall they are or, you know, what color their hair is? And we'd ask the kids, you know, how do you choose your friends? You know what I mean? It's if they're good and, you know, about not judging anything on the outside. And that's what Smiley is about, you know, seeing with his heart and, you know, and also I loved the anti-bullying because I will say after I would talk to a class, the way I would, you know, say it is because, you know, Smiley was in that big place and there was dogs that bit him in the face and, you know, probably when he went to get something to eat. And I would say it like they wouldn't let him play with their toys and they wouldn't let him find food. Instead, they bit him in the face. And is that fair to the kids, you know, that they did that? Is it Smiley's fault that he was born without eyes, you know? And they would really get it. Yeah. And I would say, I know these kids get it, you know, by using Smiley as the example and, you know, seeing those scars still through his little furry face. And they understood. And, you know, and we'd say, how, you know, those other dogs could have helped Smiley. They could have helped him find the food. They could have helped him, you know, they could have been nice to him and play with him, you know. And again, you know, like, you know, bullying is such, you know, it's just the biggest, you know, tragedy in my mind because, you know, sometimes it leads to, you know, kids doing the horrible thing to themselves, you know what I mean? And, you know, it just, again, like it just made me feel so good that, you know, maybe we were changing lives and, you know, and it was, and just being able to give back. I didn't do anything before that, giving back, you know, and he was also just inspiring. I have so many people that say that they became a therapy dog team with their dog because of Smiley.
Oh, that's wonderful.
And, yeah, so many. And even just giving back, you know, if you realize, oh, wow, does it ever feel good to give back and do something good, you know? And, you know, it was just it was beautiful.
Yeah. So anybody who's lost an animal companion knows that pain. And having an online community for myself, it was wonderful. When I lost my dog Doug at the end of 2023, it was incredible to be able to lean on that online community to help me navigate that loss. With Smiley passing in 2017, were you also able to lean on your community?
Oh, 100%. And just, you know, because, and you know, like, so you said you had, of course, with Doug, you know what I mean? You had that community. A lot of people don't have that. And people don't understand, you know what I mean? You still have to go to work the next day and people are just like, get over it. So same thing, like having people share the stories and just understand, like, and, you know, just be there for you. Yeah. And hearing the stories. And I remember asking, you know, for people to post their favorite pictures of Smiley or, you know, what they remember most about Smiley or what they learned from Smiley. And, you know, when you start hearing that, you know what I mean? And he was just shy of being 16. So like, you know, that's beautiful.
Yeah. That's a long time.
You know, yeah, exactly. It's just about going on without them. You know, it's just, you know, and they're gone. It's just sadness and you're missing, you know, something. And I had Smiley before I met my husband. I had Smiley before I had my child. You know what I mean? It was just him and I, you know, and for so long. And we went just through so much. And, you know, then I got married and he was my little ring bearer and then my son, you know. But yeah, like having everybody mourn along with me, I guess, you know, because I still hear stories. Everybody remembers. People always share this with me. They say, I remember exactly where I was when I heard that he was gone, you know, and then they share that. Like, it just reminds me of like all the people in the world, you know, like the older generation, everybody remembers where they were when JFK was shot or when this happened, it's when they heard about 9/11, and it just seemed like, wow, like Smiley was that significant. And here in Canada, this is strange. So, I'm in Canada. He wasn't as big in Canada unless it was in my community as he was all over the world, and especially through the US. If I would be in a US airport, people would just come running me going, "Oh my gosh, that's the dog from," what did they say, MSN or something? I don't even remember what that was. What is it, MSN?
I'm not sure. With the airport or the...
Yeah, it's like a news thing online.
Oh,
it was like one of the first, or it was like the Google dog, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So here it was just so different. Sorry, I have a little moany puppy. If you're wondering what that noise was. I can't even. Yeah, it was, and the outpouring of love, and it just made me realize, you know what I mean, that I'm so glad I shared him with the world. You know what I mean? And I always said that, like that this was a special dog and this wasn't just for me. You know what I mean? This dog came and healed me and got me through a lot, but he was way too big for just me, So,
and he's physically still on your property. Is that true?
Yeah. He is. Well, in two ways. Yeah, he was buried at our place, and we've moved since then. And we exhumed him, and we brought him to where we are. So, we're up north in the woods, in Canada. But so he is buried on a beautiful trail in the woods. I wanted him, just very quietly, where I would know where he is, and there's a marked, grave for him. But we also have this.
Oh my goodness. The Smiley statue.
Yeah. So
that's incredible.
And the statue was made to, because I wrote a book about Smiley, and it was released just as we were losing him. And because we did a reading program, part of the therapy work we did was a reading program for kids that struggled to read, especially out loud. And everybody remembers how scary and nervous they were when the teacher would be like, "Okay, you start reading." And kids really a lot of kids struggled with that. And they could read very fine. But it was that, everybody following along in the book going, she made a mistake or whatever. That's what they were afraid of being judged. And so this reading program, they would kids, and we did this for many, many years. The kids would curl up with Smiley, and they would read to him. Yeah. And it was also, all kinds of dogs do this. There's a lot of these reading programs. But it was even better because, we'd say that Smiley can't see, so he's not following along and judging he doesn't know if you make a mistake. But they would be so calm reading, like it really did improve their reading once they got back to school, because it's just nerves, Yeah. So anyway, so we had the statue done to be donated to the library in our previous town. And, like I said, I don't know what it is about, little small towns, but, he was just never as received, as he was like all over the world. But anyway, we had this done, and then they really backed out of taking him. They thought he might be a liability. They thought he would need maintenance. I was like, no, bronze statues don't need any maintenance. They just had all these things, that, and I was just like, so he never did go to the library. And anyway, so here he is. He came with us up north, and
where he's rightfully appreciated.
Yeah, and still one day we still think that Smiley, we live up in Haliburton and in Ontario, and Smiley was a big part up here as well, because this is where our family cottage was. This is, so he spent summers up here and weekends, and we did a lot of good things up here, helping out different the there's an organization up here for pet owners that can't afford vet care. So we helped, raise money for that. And, so we think still one day that, the statue may end up, maybe at the library here in this little village. We have I know you said that you wanted to go along and hear about, new dogs that we've had since Smiley. And the one we have,
tell me about them.
So
because we are hearing this foster puppy moan in your lap.
This little girl.
Aww.
She is just a foster right now. We just took her in last week. So she is, as you know, a double Merle Australian. I'm very tired.
Yeah. And they're really prone to blindness. Is that accurate?
Yeah, the double Merle, it's, bad breeding, and they end up, so she is blind and deaf, which I've never done. So anyway, she's just a foster, but I also have, very soon after we lost Smiley, we heard about a dog that was found in Mexico, in Tijuana, who was born with the same condition as Smiley. And we headed out and we ended up picking him up in Oregon. And anyway, so his name is Sunny, and he's a little dog, he actually looks a little like, he's like a miniature version of Smiley.
Aww.
Anyway, so we, he goes to schools when we do like author talks about the book, because the book won, a lot of school awards. So it's pretty much in all of the school libraries in Canada. And all along the provinces, the book won in different Kids' Choice Awards. Of course, it's a great story and great pictures, and the kids just love the story. So we still go to the schools and libraries and talk about the book, and they get to see. That's the thing, is the kids want to look and see what it's like to not have eyes. They want to ask questions like, how does he find his water? And they want to see. And I taught, Sunny all kinds of silly little tricks just so the kids could see, just because he doesn't have eyes, he can still do everything that a sighted dog can do. They just learn differently, and again, it just, it helps the kids see that, and it might have been different. And just that child may learn in this way. Some kids learn better by watching. Some kids learn better by doing, or reading. So, again, it's been great, that I can still carry, that on. And even I've been talking a lot lately is all the things that Smiley, I had been doing dog training for years, even before Smiley. And that's why all the girls were like, oh, you got to take the blind one. And I was like, okay. I'm like, I don't know what to do with a blind dog. But anyway, he taught me a lot, about training, because he was just a very natural dog. Do you know what I mean? He was going on instincts instead of, so he taught me a lot. And that's why everything that he taught me, I really, again, that's why, I know I know it's farm life is very difficult, isn't it? I know. Oh, so tired. So, yeah, in that way, his, his legacy lives on, because everything he taught me, you wouldn't believe, like I said, I've never had a blind and deaf dog, and this puppy has been here less than a week, and you wouldn't believe what she's been able to accomplish. When she came last week, she just couldn't stop screaming. She was just so scared, and just couldn't do anything. And now she's,
we have the opposite
out here. Oh, she's just so great. But yeah, it's been a lot of, sorry about that.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
So yeah, his legacy lives on in so many ways, and are benefiting
Incredible.
Right, Smiley? It's so great, when I come home and I still just see him in the, when I pull in, I see him, or I look out the kitchen window and I can see him glistening in the sun. I love it.
That's so wonderful. Joanne, my final question for you, because I think you have perhaps a unique perspective, is why do we love dogs?
I guess maybe there's a couple, one of them might be selfish. You know what I mean? It's just how they make us feel. Dogs make us feel better, don't you think? You know, and of course, like, it's the unconditional love, when you always hear those sayings going, God, and I see people commenting this constantly on my page. They're like, we don't deserve dogs. We don't deserve dogs, because they are just so pure and so good. And they bounce back. You know what? They really teach us, like, it doesn't matter, like, like from 2 years in a barn, you know what I mean? Being, you'd think that Smiley would have been terrified of dogs from what he went through. They just are able to overcome their past where we, sometimes cannot. We make excuses. Dogs are just so pure in that way that, and we just need to learn from them more,
Well, it is a popular sentiment, Joanne, but I think you specifically deserve dogs for sure.
Oh, thank you. I deserve this. I deserve this.
Exactly.
I swear this puppy is
still with us. Yes. Joanne, thank you so much. Is there anything else you'd like to share about Smiley?
No, just thank you, like, for this, because it's been a few years. It's been 7 years, and I just lit up when you messaged me yesterday and asked if I would come on and talk about Smiley. I'm like, yes. I want to talk about Smiley. I would love to talk about Smiley. It's just keeping him alive, and he still, like, brings me to tears. I still, like, just sometimes, and I think about him, and I still just, because he really was magical. He was, there was something truly special about him. And I'm just so happy that, people are still learning from him, and, and people want to still, do good and give back. And like I said, about remembering, you said it perfectly. Like, you recalled what I'd posted when I said we were losing him, is, honor him by giving back and, and seeing with your hearts. Like, oh my gosh, like, how about change the world? Like, he could have changed the world. And, for the people that did know him, I think people are changed. You know what I mean?
He changed their world for sure.
Yeah. But to teach, if everybody could see with their heart, we would have a very peaceful world. It's such a beautiful mantra and, way to live. And
we certainly would. Well, we couldn't have given our first 15 out of 10 to a more deserving dog. Thank you so much for telling us more about him.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Joanne. That was lovely.
Thank you.
That was so lovely.
Great talking to you.
Yeah, you as well. And finally, to really meet you for the first time is lovely.
I know. I was like, one day we'll meet. Someday we'll be in together.
Thank you so much again, and we'll talk soon.
Yeah, be in touch soon. Okay, great. Bye.
See ya. Bye. Well, that was everything about Smiley, our first dog to ever receive a 15 out of 10. Thank you so much to Joanne for telling us more about him. Quite an exceptional dog, and I'm feeling very lucky that he's the one that we decided to break our scale with. And Ohtani decided to join me halfway through that. If you need any evidence that he is an absolutely chill, gentle giant and would fit right on your couch or floor next to you, here you go. Because there are so many 15 out of 10s now, we're going to break this up into 2 parts. So next week on part 2, we will discuss the many, many 15 out of 10s that came after Smiley, as well as what the highest rated dogs look like today. If you enjoyed this, make sure to like the video and subscribe to us here on YouTube. If you're listening, make sure to add us to your Spotify or Apple playlists. And as a reminder, Ohtani, adoption fee covered, adoptable from Wags and Walks here in LA, has just been the best. Like, we have not gotten a dog to be this visually chill in our first 7 episodes. So yeah, this is great. And I'm going to hang out with him for the rest of the day. We'll see you next time.
Oh, that looks like a good dog. That's a good dog. Yeah, that looks like a good dog. A very good dog. Hey, that looks like a very good dog. Dog, is that your dog? If not, is there a way I can adopt? Because I get along with your dog, bruh, he cool. The type of dog that